This week, Wolfgang Goerlich, veteran CISO extraordinaire, is with us to discuss why he thinks organizations should stop doing phishing simulations on their employees. Then Whitney Young from Tynes joins us to talk about the case for migrating away from legacy SOAR tools. And finally, in the Enterprise Security Weekly news, is the cybersecurity talent gap a myth? Detection engineering tips for SecOps managers, cybersecurity's delusion problem, ambulance chasing and mockery in InfoSec, researchers accidentally take over a TLD, a top-level domain. Aaron Costello strikes again, finding another big oversight in a large enterprise SaaS platform. Fortinet deals with a sassy hacker, revisiting what it's like to get arrested during a physical pen test. And the advice you're getting on how to live to 100 years old is probably bad. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Digital threats evolve rapidly, making it difficult for security teams to keep pace. Tynes security automation and orchestration is different from traditional SOAR. It allows teams to move faster and make better decisions in real time. With Tynes, analysts and engineers have everything they need to automate the processes they're closest to, regardless of complexity. Built by security practitioners for security practitioners, Tynes powers mission-critical security workflows at McKesson, Canva, and Mars. Start building for free at securityweekly.com/Tynes. It is time to make network and security simpler and more flexible. Aryaka helps enterprises modernize, optimize, and transform their network and security experience with Aryaka Unified SASE as a service. The only solution that delivers performance, agility, simplicity, and security without trade-offs. Aryaka Unified SASE as a Service is a purpose-built, cloud-based offering that securely connects users and applications anywhere in the world. Visit securityweekly.com/Aryaka, that's Aryaka, to learn more. Global enterprises rely on Savient's Identity Cloud for unparalleled visibility and control over every single human and machine identity. Enterprises can better secure business processes, enable digital operations, and empower everyone who works for them and with them. Savient provides right time, right level access to the digital technologies and tools they need to do their best work. Visit securityweekly.com/Savient to schedule a demo. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy Talk Like a Pirate Day and dads annoying their families by refusing to talk normal day. This is episode 376, recorded on Thursday, September 19th, 2024. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria. All right, today we're talking about why my friend Wolfgang has it out for phishing tests. He's well known in our industry as a CISO and thought leader, and he gives delightful talks and excellent hugs. Welcome, Wolfgang.
Great to be here. Talk Like a Pirate Day takes me back. A couple teams ago, I was running a red team, and there was a local security guy in the community. He always dressed like a pirate. He would go to the Ren Fair as a pirate, and I hired him, and I deliberately had his first day be Talk Like a Pirate Day. I'm like, this is perfect. Come in full garb, bring the swords. It was awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I imagine it worked out with the date. Like you didn't move his start date 3 months to make it work. But
shifted it. I was like, what if you were to come in the middle of the week?
Yeah. So this is a fun one. This is if you asked me what's the most common, most visible security control to employees everywhere, if you ask people what their experiences with cybersecurity at work would be, I'd say phishing tests would probably be pretty high up there in the responses that you get, and security awareness campaigns, maybe the training we force people to go through, and personally, my partner just started a job on Monday at a government institution and was already phished by her new employer in the last 4 days. I think it was her second day, and yeah, so it's I think it's interesting that our topic is there's not a whole lot of categories in security where I think we'd say we could ditch that entirely. And the fact that it is such a visible one, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah, we did it to ourselves, right? The old phrase about not everything that matters can be counted, and then everything you can count matters really applies here. It's a great metric. I can measure it. It's easy. Does it matter? I would argue not.
Yeah, so you're getting into my questions here. I literally have that as a question. Is like the reason this is so popular is because it's so visible and so measurable?
Oh yeah, and it's such an easy thing to talk about click rates and who failed and whatnot, and because organizations have been doing it for a while, I walked in. I'm relatively new to my role, and I walked in, and the first thing they said is, "Oh, let me tell you about our phishing rates." I'm like, "Oh, cringe." And yet, when I go to talk to the parts of the organization, the leaders in the organization, one of the things they're talking about is, "Oh yeah, we'll look for your phishing. What can we do to improve our click rates?" I'm like, "All right, well, we'll talk about that." And I'm glad you're security aware, but I'd much rather, like, of all the things to be aware of and all the things that in the universe that we could maybe make an improvement on, whether or not you type your password into a link in an email is not exactly the highest on the list, I would argue.
So when it comes to regulations, compliance, the kind of stuff you're forced to do in a security program, whether it has an impact or it's effective or not, is PCI. That's the one. I grew up in a payment processor. That was my first job in the industry, and where I learned the ropes on a lot of on all parts of security. So I'm not as well rounded as you in terms of that. So I know, like in PCI security awareness, there are some call outs there. There is some stuff you have to do, but is phishing something that you, because of regulations, because of compliance, or other requirements, you can't get away from, or is this all voluntary?
I think a lot of it is voluntary. So your point about security awareness, then that's a much broader topic, right? Like the connection between awareness and action is one that's eminently tenuous. However, what have organizations been doing? They're like, oh, you need to do security awareness and demonstrate your people know how to do it. So what do? We're like, oh, what can we do? Oh, I just got an ad for security vendor X. What do they do? They provide training and they send a fish. Okay, that sounds like that'll be fine. A test to an auditor year one, year two, they're like, hey, we hear you do phishing tests. Yes, we do still do it. Year three, year four. Now you're 5 years into it, and your auditor is expecting that you're doing phishing tests because that's the way we do security awareness.
It's like the chicken tenders on the kids menu of InfoSec, right? Like you always know it's going to be there. So it's like
Yes.
a safe bet. You know your kids are going to eat it. You know it's going to be there. I'd argue a pen test is similar. Like a lot of people have pen tests who have no business, nowhere near ready to have a pen test, but they have it because it's required, and they don't know what else to ask for. They don't know what else to do.
Right. But at least with a pen test, you're only making your IT people feel sad. Right? Oh, my servers are misconfigured. The real problem I have with phishing, and I mentioned this on LinkedIn and you reached out to me, right? Is that so much of what good security is building connections, is building relationships, it's having empathy for the people we're trying to protect, right? I'm fond of saying that kindness is the first principle in security. And yet we go to phishing. And what do people do when they're phishing? First off, who do we give it to? We usually give it to the younger people who are like new and up and coming. Hey, this will be fun. Why don't you phish the organization? Second off, there's a whole bunch of templates that are nice and nasty. Uh, and third of all, what gets the most clicks if you scare people? So you look at some of these things. We've seen people offering bonuses around holidays. We've seen people offering vaccines and PPE during the pandemic. We saw fake layoff notices, right? These things that happen that just absolutely rack the relationships between security and the user community are by default the ones that work the best. The default, the ones that the vendors push you to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's call out some of those specific ones. I put some of them in the show notes here. We've got the GoDaddy one in there, which was one of the bonus ones. It was a $600 bonus, and we've got the most recent one is the Ebola scare at University of California, Santa Cruz, which was a bad one on many levels. Not only did it undermine the like the health notification services, and that the whole process and the trust in that. But it also, kind of creates a stereotype of South Africa, because they're saying we had some colleagues come back from South Africa with Ebola. South Africa hasn't had an Ebola outbreak since I think 1997, and we last had one less than 10 years ago.
It is insanity.
I think one of the worst has to be Chicago Tribune. I think takes the cake because they had just taken away bonuses. This was the Christmas bonus one you mentioned. They had just announced that their folks would not be getting bonuses, and then that phishing email was like a couple weeks after that announcement said, "Hey, bonuses are back."
How insane! Again, super low empathy, very unkind. And what type of damage did that do to the relationship between the employees and IT, let alone IT security?
Yeah. Yeah, so certainly some ethical issues here. Some folks where clearly the threshold of what's okay and what isn't okay is not being discussed, and people are crossing that line. And well, I mean, if you agree that there could be a line, right? Like when I used to pen test, some of my fellow pen testers had a very strong sense of ethics and personal morals, and refused to do any kind of pretexting, any kind of anything that involved them lying to people that they didn't explicitly have an agreement with, that it was okay to lie with them. So business hired us to do this pen test and said on behalf of their employees, yeah, it's totally fine to lie and trick our employees. That's what we want you to do because that's what bad guys could do. So we actually had specific people on the team who were comfortable doing that, that would do that in place of other people who just flat out, in general principles, refuse to do it. So that was you know, back then when I was young, I just thought of it in terms of, can I get good at this or not good at this? I just saw it as a skill, and it didn't even occur to me that I could just opt out of doing it altogether, and really made me think hard about how it feels to be on the receiving end of this, which I've got some pen test stories about because I've done physical pen tests where I've seen the panic in people's eyes when they find me rooting around in places that I shouldn't be, and particularly in places overseas where neither of us speak the same language. That gets even more dicey.
And if you think about the pen testing perspective, it's you don't even need to do it, right? So let's just ask ourselves what we're trying to test. We're trying to test if we had a user account in the environment, or we're trying to test like if we got presence in a certain part of the environment. Do we even need to make people feel bad and trick them to do that? We always know that maybe 1 in 5 people are going to click, and we can do certain things to raise that up or raise that down. And there's certain populations that click more than others, and there's psychology behind that. But if we just say, okay, this is similar to pen testing, internal versus external. What was the old thing you used to do? You do an external pen test. If you broke in, great. If you didn't, fine. The next stage was the internal pen test, where they assumed you broke in. We can do the exact same thing, and I used to do this all the time. We would say, okay, we will want 6 credentials inside. Don't have to be real credentials, just 6 credentials inside that we will then use as part of our attack. Because we know that if there are 100 people, I'm at least going to get 6 credentials if I send out a phish.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, this is, like most risk, this is not something you can drive to zero. And in a pen test, you're doing a sampling. You're not touching all systems. You're not going to claim that you found all the vulnerabilities, all the ways in, or anything like that. It's a best effort type of thing.
Yeah. And the fact is that just about everyone is susceptible to phishing and has been. Do you know we're coming up on 30 years of phishing? I don't know if I went back and checked it. Oh, yeah. 1995, the first phish in AOL, the first phish kit. Yep. So 30 years, and people are still falling for it. it's not going to go away. We're not going to be able to train people. And I would argue that most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, fall for fishes as well. Like I fell for one a couple summers ago that was particularly well crafted. That was trying to get my Instagram creds, which is hilarious because my Instagram is completely boring. Nothing but pictures of my feet. Who wants that? I don't know. Um, there's no pictures of my feet, but the fact is everyone falls for these things. So they're at a certain point in time, we're not really raising awareness anymore. We're not really improving our security anymore. All we're doing is running around and making people feel bad about themselves, and I do not understand the value of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that that's a good point. Let's dive down that rabbit hole. Let's say, you were able to, just stop business, stop operations, get everybody like as phishing resistant as you possibly could. Like you did all the training, you did all the testing. They don't fall, none of your employees fall for stuff anymore. Um, you're not going to keep all those employees, right? Like there's this constant new employees coming in, old employees leaving. You constantly have churn in staff, and yeah, it's as I think we've seen with like the bonus thing, like even with the testing, it's not going to tell us the full story. That's not telling us the full story because we're not doing everything an attack. Well, hopefully we're not doing everything an attacker's willing to do when ethics, morals, and feelings go out the window.
Yeah, so from a defense perspective, you can feel like, oh, we must be really secure. We fish ourselves all the time, and yet have unpatched vulnerabilities everywhere and are running an Avanti VPN, right? I mean, the fish is such a small sliver of a tactic that adversaries use. However, let's go back to what you're saying about let's assume we get everyone to not fish. What does that mean? That means everyone has to slow down and think about everything that comes through. If you look at the psychology of human cognition, the old thinking fast and slow, right? System one, system two. System one is automatic processing. I'm clicking, I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm in the zone, muscle memory. System two is I'm getting out of that, I'm being thoughtful, I'm thinking. System two is very, very cognitively heavy, but it's also very expensive.
Yeah, you can only do that for a couple hours a day, maybe, and your brain is just fried.
The average number is 5%. So if you figure about 16 hours awake, there's about 1 hour a day that you can do that you could be
So
fully
I'm probably
present.
overestimating my abilities.
Well, because we get really good at muscle memory everywhere, which is also why like the typical people who are easy to fish fall into two categories. One who's simply in the process of doing emails, so think payment, procurement, people who do comms. The other one, my organization did a fish, and they're like, "Oh, this one was surprisingly well clicked on." Well, it wasn't a surprise to me. It was actually a Teams message, and the organization uses Teams, so of course everyone is always clicking on Teams. No one thought about it. So the cognitive load, if we were to get people to truly never be fished, you're wasting so much human capacity just trying to figure out if a URL is right. Why aren't we spending that time just making security systems better when they do get phished?
Yeah, exactly. We don't think of, and I think that's something I've tried to highlight when I do postmortems when I talk about breaches. Is look, this is like a 17-step process. You don't have to put all your money, energy, and resources into stopping it at step one. You need to spread some of that out and try and catch it later down the line because preventative controls will fail. Some percentage of the time. But yeah, to your point, there's a few other things I think to touch on there. You mentioned Teams message. So first of all, email. I think a lot of people don't realize how many processes go through email. Like there's so many different types of emails that you get. Like I've heard one of the most successful phishing emails are annoying newsletters that you're inclined to click unsubscribe on, and unsubscribe is the phishing link, right? And I think most people, even technical people, wouldn't think that the unsubscribe link would be the trap, right? So you've got expense processes going through email. You've got newsletters coming in through email. It's not all just personal correspondence or work correspondence. So that's one aspect of it. And then, I think another is that phishing works over a lot of different channels, not just email, right? We've all got Slack now. In some cases, outside organizations can send Slack messages in. We've seen info stealers steal Slack OAuth tokens and sell them on the black market. And, that's how people get into the organization. And then you've got WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, SMS, so many other ways to phish people other than email. And it seems like even with these phishing tests, we're overly focused on just corporate email, right?
Right. And that's such a good point. My back to thinking fast and slow, my security mantra around that is when work looks like work, work gets done. That's can be positive, it can be negative. If it's the phishing example, if it looks like work, it's going to get accomplished. And what we're trained to do and what we're used to doing, what's part of our system one thinking, changes over time, right? Like today, no one would fall for the AOL message because half of the audience probably doesn't remember what AIM is, if we're honest. And 10 years ago, no one was falling for SMS text messages because we weren't ordering DoorDash and cars and food and everything else and getting links in our chat. The minute the links went up and people got used to clicking on them, phishing people realized, well, that is now part of our system one thinking where we will follow that. Work looks like work, work will get done. And as we distribute our comms, to your point, Slack messages are very easy to trick a lot of people into, and other things where you pass links out and convince people. So wherever the comms are happening is where the muscle memory is, and wherever the muscle memory is where we have the human level vulnerability. And you're right, we are not only is phishing just one small teeny tiny tactic, we're just focusing on one comms channel. And even within that comms channel, you mentioned OAuth. I love this, by the way. Once we move everything to phish resistant multi-factor, we will never be phished again, except you see the OAuth requests, which aren't even stealing your username and password anymore. They're asking you to enable an application and using that token. Yeah, exactly. So not only is it one comms channel, but it's also just one slice of information, one way of tricking people that is being tested.
Yeah, and I don't think that's something I've seen employees trained on is the fact that when you click allow, when you enable an integration, with a session that you're already logged into and handing off that OAuth key, that you're effectively sending someone something that's even more valuable than a username and password, I would argue, because it's like almost like a half factor, right? Like, single factor is username and password. This isn't even that. It's just a single string that gets you in. Yeah. So, one last point there that I want to, before we move on from this, that I want to get into is, talking about your, you called it system one, system two thinking. The percentage of, once you train somebody to be good at spotting phishing, inevitably they're going to spot things that aren't phishing as phishing, right? There's going to be false positives, not only are they spending all this mental time on it, they're also going to ignore legit emails that are maybe urgent, that maybe have time sensitivity. They're just going to delete those and report them as phishing.
It goes both ways. There's a researcher, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name on this. So I'm sorry, I've talked to you recently and I forget your name. Out of my home state, he works at MSU, and his theory is that phishing is storytelling. And effectively, he will put someone in a scenario and they'll monitor them and they'll give them a phish and see how they react. And so two things happen. One, exactly what you said, which is the false positives go up, right? Because it looks like a fish, smells like a fish, therefore I will report it as a fish. And that, of course, makes some more work for our people. Maybe that's a problem, maybe it's not, depends on the volume and everything. The other thing that I find really fascinating, Adrian, is the opposite, which is he has seen people fall for fish. And then they're like, hey, why did you do that? He goes, oh, that wasn't a fish. I thought maybe it would be, but I was told that like there would be typos and misspelling. So I looked back over it and there's no typos. Or
Mhm.
I was taught that a phishing email would only be asking me for my password. And this isn't asking me for that. It's asking me to allow something.
They were taught one weird trick
One weird track, and
to spot all phishing.
yeah, and they get tunnel vision on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so speaking of research, that was something I was going to bring up here. There was a really interesting study done. I don't know if you've seen this in Switzerland in late 2021. And it was a 15-month study on 14,000 individuals working for a large public company, which was private. They didn't say who it was, but let's see, somewhere here in my notes I've got the outcomes from that. But one of them was that phishing training did more damage than good. They found that was not effective, and exactly that. You would have an impact to productivity that a lot of other studies didn't look for. They only looked for whether or not they spotted the fish and successfully avoided the fish. They didn't look at how many valid emails they skipped over, and how they lost their opportunity for a promotion or got a project behind, or all the other unintended consequences of getting you know really good at gamifying spotting fishes. But they did find there were two positive findings from that study, which was called "Phishing in Organizations: Finding from a Large Scale and Long Term Study." And the names on that are Danielle Lane, Carrie Kostianen, and that looks like I can't say the last name. I don't even understand those letters. Sorry, but looks like Romanian or something. But yeah, so the two positive ones, they found warnings attached to suspicious emails are effective. Like this came from the outside, right? And it's pretending to come from internal, but you've got the big red external sender. And they found crowdsourcing phishing email detection was both effective and feasible. So giving somebody a phishing reporting button, even though like the accuracy was like maybe 65% or something like that, was still pretty useful in spotting real phishing emails.
Yeah. So when this study came out, um, I was excited about it because it backed up something anecdotally I've been hearing ever since I've been beating the drum of we need to kill phishing tests.
Yeah.
Is CISOs will share with me, oh, this is so funny. This is so random. You won't believe this. We did a test. And then when the pen testers came in, we actually did worse on the pen test, even though we thought we would fish and train them, right? Or the next time a real fish came in, the performance went down. Isn't that so weird? And I heard this story like 4 or 5 times. And then to see it studied and see it in black and white was really
Yeah.
good. So clearly, there's a cognitive issue that we're not meeting with these test results. But this idea of warnings, this idea of labels, fits right back into it because if you get yourself into a really good groove of internal, external, you can spot things very quickly. And the crowdsource side is really, really intriguing. I'm not entirely sure how to leverage that. I do know I've got one friend who's a CISO, and he calls it bring your own fish. He won't fish his people with fish kits, but if a fish gets through, he will use that as the next official fish. So he's actually replaying real attacks and real adversaries. And one of the things he was doing was he was looking exactly at the crowd sourced identification. Maybe there's a way to use something like Waze. Maybe there's a way that some of these vendors can use that as part of the ingestion. It'd be super
Yeah, some
cool.
vendors do use and obviously you can't use all of them. You still need a human in that loop, right? Because some of it, yeah, you as you pointed out before, you're going to destroy trust and relationships with your employees.
Right, right. Which is why I kind of like to bring your own fish. That wasn't me. That was an adversary who got through. But I don't want to seem naive. This is a valid target. This is a valid
Mhm.
tactic. Criminals will continue to do it. I just simply believe we should do more before and after instead of relying on our people or pushing it down to the people.
Yeah, and there's this component of this that I really dislike. This human is the weakest link thinking. Which is kind of a cop out. It's like, well, it's not my fault as a security person. Like humans just be humans, right? As if there's nothing you can do to protect them better, to mitigate them, to give them some like there's so many things you could be doing on their workstations that protect them. Maybe Joe just clicks everything, right? So Joe, you get a Chromebook from now on. Okay, like you're not allowed to have Windows or Mac. Like there's things you can do to protect your employees. You can't just no, like Cindy likes to click things. There's nothing we can do about it. So I hate that kind of human is the weakest link. Because it enables you to go down this path of self-defeatistness. What's the word I'm looking for there?
Self-defeating thinking.
Yeah, self-defeating thinking. Yeah, there you go.
I was going to say we can blame Bruce Schneier. Secrets and Lies was the first time that was written, that human is the weakest
link.
Really? People were saying it before that, I'm sure, but that I did some research to find the first time it was written. It was Bruce Schneier. We can blame him.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think the thing, before we wrap here, that really boggled my mind was the first time I heard about policies to fire people if they failed too many phishing tests.
Right.
And that just boggled my mind. Like I totally get it. If your CFO fails too many anti-money laundering trainings, like that's the heart of their job. Like they need to handle the money without losing it and sending it to the criminals. It's pretty important. But for just an average employee, to be expected to ace all these phishing tests or they get fired, that just seemed like madness to me.
I agree. It's even worse if you're not only blaming them but you're firing them. Didn't we get in this industry because tech was fun and we wanted to help people? It seems like not fun uses of technology and not helpful at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure some portion of people that got into this industry got into it, for those gotcha moments. Those, some of the pen testers out there. Like I've seen pen testers ask for extra time on an engagement just so they can get an exploit to work. Just because they really want to get that exploit working. I'm like, there's zero value in that for the customer. That's not going to improve what they get out of this at all. But yeah, before we wrap this, what should companies, if we're going to axe that from the budget, where would you send that instead? What should companies be doing instead of phishing testing?
Improved detect and response. Certainly strengthening the authentication, moving to phish resistant factors, certainly knowing that there'll still be some phishing. Where else would I invest in that? Obviously, awareness training continues to be important, but doing awareness training on other things that we can measure that are more meaningful, awareness training that's targeted towards your role. So think developer training, IT training. Those would be the areas that I would focus in on, and I do focus in on.
Yeah, and do you want to plug B-Sides Detroit at all?
Oh, yeah. And so this and other topics we will be talking about in B-Sides Detroit. We're bringing B-Sides Detroit back in the beginning of 2025, so keep a lookout for that. And we are focusing in on the human factors for this return of this B-Sides conference. So certainly, thank you for the opportunity to plug. I wasn't going to, but since you mentioned it, yes, please come to Detroit or submit a talk. We'd love to have you there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk next generation SIMs with Whitney Young from Tynes.